Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing another kind of sit down video, just basically going over my first 2 years at UCLA and kind of what that experience has been like academically, and specifically the classes that I took and how I felt that they were. I'm in UCLA right now. I'm going into my 3rd year and I'm a nursing major, part of the School of Nursing, which is the smallest school within UCLA. There's only about 40 to 50 students per cohort, so like within each year. So we're a really small group, and so that gives us like a very unique perspective of like the UCLA life and academics and all that. So I thought I'd make a video here kind of sharing that, and hopefully this will help some people. I know that I've gotten a lot of comments, not a lot, but like I've gotten a few comments asking for me to make a video like this, just kind of talking about nursing at UCLA and what I think of it. So that's what this video is going to be. And as someone who was really nervous before I started in this program, just because there wasn't much information online about it or anything like that, I know that a video like this would have helped me a lot. And so I hope that this will help someone else too. And then just to kind of preface this, for me, my whole first year was online. And then my second year was like partially online. It was hybrid for a little while. And then spring quarter was fully in person again. So it kind of went back and forth. So that kind of gives me a unique experience that might make future experiences a little bit different. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're watching this. And just as like a quick overview, so you kind of get the idea of how this is going to play out. Most of our classes within our first 2 years are our GEs, or general education courses. And so these GEs are taken with all of the other students at UCLA. We don't get like priority selection for those or anything. And we get to pick those ourselves. So those will be in those typical big lecture halls that you see at big schools like UCLA, where there's like hundreds of students in this class, and there's teachers' assistants that have like individual discussion sections and stuff, and then a professor that teaches this big lecture. So that was kind of the experience with general education courses and a few of the other required courses that we had to take our first 2 years. But from this point on, and also with some of the nursing courses that we took over the past 2 years, those will only be with the nursing cohort. So with the 50 students in my cohort, and those are the classes that are offered through the nursing school, and those are guaranteed for us, so we don't have to worry about those in our schedule, which is really nice. So like next year and the year after that, all of my classes are guaranteed. I won't have to worry about like scheduling stuff anymore, because that was always really stressful. So that's one thing that I don't have to worry about anymore, which is really nice. So yeah, I'll start with freshman year, and I'll kind of talk about the required courses that I had to take through the nursing program. And then I'll go into sophomore year and talk about that. And then I'll finish off with the GEs, or general education classes, that I took, and if I recommend them or not, because there were definitely some bad ones and then some really good ones that I enjoyed. So I'll make sure to talk about those. And so, like I said, another unique thing about the nursing major is that we have a specific course sequence that's given to us, and we have to very strictly stick to that. So they tell us exactly what classes we take each quarter, and then that's basically chosen for us, except for the GE courses that we have to complete on our own, and that we get to choose within that schedule. But those slots are still planned out for us. Also, just as a side note, I know this video isn't as professional as a setup as I would usually want it to be. Not that like I usually have a very professional setup, but I'm recovering from a cold right now, and I'm about to leave for our trip to Yellowstone, but I just hit 200 subscribers, which I was really, really thankful for. And so I wanted to make sure to get this video out as kind of like a 200 subscriber special, and to just kind of show my appreciation for you guys, since I know this video was pretty well requested, and if I didn't film it now, I wouldn't be able to film it until August. So apologies if this isn't as like high quality as you guys would have expected, but I hope that it can still be informational and a good tool for future nursing students. Okay, so the first set of classes that I want to talk about for my freshman year is the Chem 14 series. So this is Chemistry 14A, 14B, and 14C. So the classes do go on beyond that to 14D and so on, but those are the only ones that we're required to take. And this is definitely what people tend to be most scared about. These classes kind of have a reputation of being very hard, and they're just one of those big lectures that a lot of STEM students at UCLA take. And yeah, it's known to not be a very easy class. We take all 3 of these throughout our freshman year, so like fall, winter, and spring quarter. So we're done with them by the end of freshman year, which is good, but it was definitely a hard thing to start with. So I'd say that the classes get easier chronologically. So like I would have said that 14A was probably the hardest class out of the three. And that could have been partially due to the fact that it was during like our freshman fall quarter when we were first learning about like college classes and kind of trying to figure it out as we went. So yeah, it was definitely a challenge, and it was a lot of memorization and a lot of information that was thrown at us. And within those 10 weeks of the quarter, it was hard to balance it at first too, which made that class a little more challenging since you really need to be on top of it. But it's definitely doable. I know personally I was the most scared for Chem 14C, which is organic chemistry, and that ended up being my favorite class by far out of that series. Not that I like Chem that much, but it was my favorite class out of that series. It was the one that made the most sense, and it kind of connected all of these concepts for me. And it was the one that I got the highest grade, and I got an A in that class. So I was really, really proud of myself for that, because I definitely struggled with the first two classes. Yeah, so that's kind of a light at the end of the tunnel for those. You kind of are suffering through 14A and 14B, but once you get to 14C, it definitely gets easier in my opinion. And this is something that's required for everyone. So if you, like within the nursing major, obviously, so if you took AP Chem or anything like that, you can't like transfer those credits or anything. But I did hear that AP Chem helped a lot with 14A for people who took AP Chem in high school. So that's kind of a plus. That might help you out a little bit. And so personally, some things that helped me for the Chem 14 series, not that I think I'm like a very good note taker to like take advice from, just because the way that I study often doesn't work for a lot of other people. But what I would do is I would take notes on the lecture slides during lectures, so just directly on the slides, so that I wouldn't have to rewrite things and I could focus on what the professor was saying and add that to my slides. And so like I would download it as a PDF and write it on my iPad. And then I tried to go to review sessions as much as I could from teaching assistants, from the TAs. I know this is like what everyone says, but it really was so helpful when I did go. So I can highly recommend that. That's always super helpful. They tend to explain things in a little bit easier of a way, like a way that's a little easier to understand from like a student's perspective. So that was always really helpful. And the biggest thing that always helped me, which I think is a kind of controversial way to study, I know this doesn't work for everyone, but this is just kind of how my brain works. I would make these huge review sheets at the end of each like section of the course. So like before midterms or before the final. And it would be this super colorful page with like diagrams, and I'd basically be rewriting all of my notes, and formulas and equations, and everything would be color coded, and it would take me super long to do, but it really helped me. I just once I visualize it like that, and once it's very clearly written out for me, then that's how it sticks in my brain. So unfortunately, that long process is how I learn best. So that's definitely something that you have to set aside time for. Kind of have to start studying a little bit earlier if you're planning on doing something like that. But it definitely works well for me, and I've done it for a lot of other classes. So that's an idea for you. The next set of classes that I took my freshman year were actually our first nursing specific classes at UCLA. So those were N10 and N20, so nursing 10 and nursing 20. And these were specifically focused on, or they were supposed to be about social justice and kind of the nurse's role in like a social justice perspective, kind of about how you're supposed to advocate for your patients and advocate for how nurses are portrayed in the media, and kind of creating a better connotation for what nurses are in like the public eye. And in theory, I think that this is a really cool class. I think it's something that could be like very interesting. However, the course itself was a lot easier than I expected it to be. Not that that's a bad thing, but all the concepts were pretty straightforward, and it was a 2-part series, so nursing 10 and nursing 20. And I think it definitely could have been condensed into one class. I think a lot of things were a bit repetitive, but yeah, this class is definitely not anything to worry about. So it's a great way to kind of meet your fellow cohort if you haven't gotten a chance to meet before this. I know my cohort, we were very close just because we were all online, and it was kind of our only way to communicate. So we had group chats and stuff, and we would have Zoom meetings, and we would like play games online and stuff. So we were pretty close before this already, but this is kind of that first class where you meet everyone in person, and there's some group presentations and stuff. So it's a great way to meet people, if nothing else. Then staying on the topic of nursing classes, the last nursing class that we take for freshman year was nursing 13, which was anatomy. So this class is obviously just your typical anatomy class, except it's only with nursing people, so it's kind of smaller. And I was a little worried about this class, but it wasn't too bad. It was definitely a lot of memorization, but I'd say that physiology was probably harder. That comes in sophomore year. So anatomy is just kind of like the basics, and physiology is when it all really comes together. So not too bad at all yet for freshman year. Then the next class that we took freshman year that was required was Life Science 7A, which was molecular and cellular biology. And then we took 7C sophomore year. So we were able to skip 7B out of that series. And I know a lot of people don't like the life science series, me included. So I was really excited for this compared to chemistry, just because I like biology more than chemistry. And this was mostly just a biology course. But the tests are extremely difficult, and they're known for having like weirdly worded questions. And it was just a lot of like tedious work that was just frustrating at times. So it's fine if you study for it enough, and you just really have to know how they word questions. And it's really just like a trial and error process. Like with the midterms, if you don't score as well in the beginning, everyone ends up doing better on the later midterms and stuff. So definitely don't worry about that too much. And it's easier than chem. So that's the important part. But yeah, not too bad. I'd say that 7A, I'd say they were honestly like about the same, 7A and 7C. I'll talk about 7C a little bit more later, but yeah, not too bad at all. Just like your typical biology class. And then the last required course that we had to take freshman year, besides the general education, the GE classes, was math. So I took math 3A instead of 31A. We have the option to take either. I know 3A is a lot easier from what I've heard. I can't speak from experience, but I thought that 3A was really easy. We didn't really get past like early calculus. I took AP Calculus AB in high school, but I didn't pass that AP test. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to take this math class. So that's one thing. If you're able to take AP Calculus in high school, that one is a credit that transfers. And also AP Psychology is another credit that transfers into the nursing program. There's not many, but those are two. Also English, AP or IB English. So yeah, that math class was not bad at all. For the English requirement, I actually didn't have to take an English class because I took IB English in high school. And so that covered my English requirement. Otherwise, I would have had to take English 3. So I can't speak on that class. Yeah, that was all of the classes basically for freshman year except for the GEs. So for sophomore year, the first class that I'm going to talk about is Life Science 7C. So like I said, this is continuing on from 7A, which was biology. This one is physiology, specifically for humans and animals. So it was kind of like a broader physiology than what we'll get in the nursing physiology class. So there's a lot of overlap between those two classes, which is kind of nice. We took Life Science 7C first, so it was a good prerequisite for our nursing physiology class. But yeah, there was a lot of information that we just don't need to know for nursing with animals and all that. So that was a bit frustrating, and I definitely didn't pay attention to that material as much as I probably should have. But that class wasn't too bad at all. Once you've done 7A and you kind of understand how the classes work and how the Life Sci 7 series like kind of works, that makes this class a lot easier. Okay, the next nursing specific class is going to be MIMG 10, which is microbiology. And this course is actually a nursing only class, even though it's not through the nursing department. So that's kind of confusing. But yeah, so this was a microbiology course, and we had group presentations in this class where we each had to pick like a disease within a group and present them, which was kind of cool. But yeah, not too bad of a course, just another like typical biology course, just in a smaller setting than like the life science courses. So this class was very manageable. So then next we had nursing 3, which was our nursing specific physiology class. And we also take pathophysiology later in the quarter. So we have a lot of this physiology knowledge, which is super important. It's kind of just the idea of like how all of these body systems that we learned about in anatomy, how they all work together. So really, really important stuff. Physiology was, like I said, kind of just an extension from anatomy. Not too bad at all. Like I said, just a lot of memorization. Just one of those things that you want to look back on again and try to like remember as much as you can from that class for future classes. They all kind of build off of each other. Then we have Nursing 54A, which is Pathophysiology 1. So I had the privilege of taking this class with Dr. BBJ. She is such an amazing professor, and she was one of those professors where like anything she explains, it's just, she uses words that are just so easy to understand, and you're able to like really understand even the hard concepts. She just did a really good job simplifying it and repeating information and explaining things in a very clear way, which I really appreciate because this class is very content heavy. It's a lot of information and super interesting stuff. It's like really made me realize that I wanted to be a nurse like more than I already knew that I did. It just made me super excited to like see this stuff in the real world. We saw a lot of like gross diseases and infections and all that, but it was super cool and really, really interesting. So I definitely really like this course. This was probably my favorite class last year just because like I said, it just inspired me and made me really excited to go into nursing. Then the next class was Nursing 50 Epidemiology. And this class was fun. It was definitely very relevant because it was like right in the middle of COVID, of course. So we had a lot to talk about with that, which made it very interesting. We learned a lot about how viruses grow and kind of how we could relate that all to what was going on with us. So I think actually like being in a pandemic made it all of the concepts a lot more straightforward and like easier to understand with that like background knowledge. So that was kind of cool. And it's definitely easier than like anatomy or physiology. It was a lot less memorization in my opinion. And a lot of the concepts were a lot more straightforward. Like I said, with the pandemic, the midterms and the finals were like in-person written tests compared to microbiology where it was like presentations and all that. So that was a little bit different, but yeah, not bad at all. Then the next required course that we had to take was Nursing 173W, or Intro to Nursing Research and Writing. So this is one of our two first upper division classes. So basically at UCLA, it's a little bit different at every school, but at UCLA, any class that's a 3-digit number, so like a 100 class, will be an upper division course. So that means that's like for juniors and seniors. So this was like supposed to be a little bit harder of a course, but it wasn't too bad. So this class is a lot of busy work. There's a lot of smaller assignments that can be a little bit overwhelming in the beginning just because like while you're trying to get organized and kind of figure out how to plan out like your work, it can seem like there's a lot of things that you might be forgetting about, but they're very forgiving with assignments. So if you forget things every now and then, it won't make or break your grade. The main thing about this class is the final paper. So it's basically just this class where you write a massive research paper based on a scientific study of your choice. It has to be something like related to like the health field in some way. My study was about how emotional abuse can change desires for marriage and fertility rates in the future. So like people who were emotionally abused as a child would be less likely to want to get married and have children in the future. It was a really interesting study done in South Korea, and that was basically what I wrote about for 10 weeks. So this sounds like a very daunting class just because, at least it was for me, I kind of have developed this phobia through college of like writing essays. I just get very overwhelmed with it. And so this was definitely a scary class for me, but once I kind of got into the swing of things, it really wasn't bad at all. The essay and my paper ended up being close to 30 pages, double spaced, so it was quite a bit. But we wrote it section by section each week. There was a total of 9 sections, and they very clearly state what they want you to write in each section, and they give you plenty of time to do it. And there's a bunch of peer reviews. So you go and comment on 2 other people's papers every week and give them, or twice a week actually, and give them peer review. And everyone kind of works together, and it makes it a lot more manageable. So I really appreciate how they had that class set up. That was really helpful. Then the last course that I'm going to be talking about for sophomore year, and before I move on to the GEs, is going to be Biostats 100A. So this is the other upper division course that I was talking about. Also not as bad as it seems. So this is going to be our last math class that we'll take, biostatistics. So it's just a statistics class, but it's a lot less math-based and a lot more like theoretical, I guess, at least with the professor that I had. He definitely made it a lot more of a theory-based class, which I appreciated. So it wasn't just like immediately first day, here's all these equations and all that. And we were also allowed to have what he called a cheat sheet on the midterms and the final. So it was an in-person test, but we were allowed to have 1 page front and back of information, which really worked out for me since that's how I study anyway. So I was able to just use my study sheets that I make anyway as my reference sheets for the test. So that was super helpful and definitely helped me do well. But yeah, the class isn't bad at all. I didn't even really do that many review problems, I would say. There's some in the textbook, but they're not really that helpful. Honestly, as long as you keep up with the class and you make a good review sheet that has all the information that you need, it's really not that bad. Yeah, definitely super doable. So for the last section of this video, I'm going to be talking about the GE courses that I took. And within nursing, we have sections set apart for either GE courses or Comm or Psych. So Comm is a communications class that we have to take, either Comm 1 or Comm 10. I'll talk about that in a bit. And then Psych, everyone has to take Psych 10 if they didn't take AP Psych in high school. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to take AP Psych in high school. They didn't have space in the class. So I had to take Psych 10, which made me have to take an extra GE course in a quarter when I wouldn't have usually had to take one when everyone else wasn't taking one. So that kind of sucked, but I was able to do it. So it wasn't too bad because they really want us to get our GEs done by the end of sophomore year so that we can move into clinicals and all that, starting with our junior year. So I made sure to be able to do that. And I had to take I think 2 quarters where I had an extra class compared to all the other nursing majors. So that kind of sucked, but it is what it is. So yeah, everyone on my UCLA has to take 10 GE courses within the 3 categories. So the first one is arts and humanities. The second one is society and culture. And the third is scientific inquiry. So the scientific inquiry one is completely covered by like the Chem courses that we take and the life science courses and MIMG, I think too. So you don't have to worry about that one at all. So we just worry about the arts and humanity and society and culture the 2. And yeah, so it's those other like 6 spots that you have to worry about. And some of them are actually covered by courses that we take, I believe. They end up explaining to you how many you need. The amount of spots on the course sequence that's given to us before fall quarter, that's how many you'll need. So you don't need to worry about like taking summer classes or anything like that unless you have to take psych and English and math or something like that, or you fail a class and you have to retake it. Then you might run out of space for all the GEs. But yeah, so I'll start talking about Comm first. So Comm, I ended up taking Comm 1 instead of Comm 10, which is what most people did. I know my friend John, he took Comm 10, and it's definitely it's known as a weeder class for the Comm major. So basically, like, it's a super hard class to like weed out the bad students in the Comm major. That's kind of what people say, but he didn't do bad in that class, so I guess that ended up working out. But it's definitely, I would say that Comm 1 is definitely a lot easier from what I've heard and from my experience. The way the class worked for me was that we just had 3 speeches that we had to do, and it was over Zoom, which made it a lot less intimidating for like people that have like social anxiety or fears of public speaking or anything like that. The good thing was that the class wasn't too big, so even if it wasn't on Zoom, I think it would have been all right. They allow you to have speaker notes in most classes, and it's a super welcoming environment. People give you a lot of like positive feedback after you're done speaking, and the professor was super cool. I think he retired now, but he was awesome. He made it a really open environment and really welcoming, and he really developed a connection with all the students, which was cool to see from a GE class where you wouldn't usually have that kind of connection with your classmates and stuff. So I was able to meet a lot of people outside of the nursing major, which was really nice. Yeah, I had to write like 3 speeches, and then there was a couple other assignments. I think there was like an essay, but not too bad at all. So definitely recommend Comm 1 over Comm 10. Then yeah, like I said, I had to take Psych 10, which is basically pretty similar to AP Psych. So from what I've heard from people that took AP Psych, it was pretty much the same thing, just like your average class. The course, the material was pretty interesting, so I didn't mind it that much. If you have like good time management skills, this class isn't bad at all. So don't worry too much about that if you don't get the chance to take AP Psych in high school. So the first 2 are part of the Classics series. So Classics is a department at UCLA where it's mostly focused on like Greek and Roman history and like that kind of stuff. So I took 2 classes in the Classics department. Those were Classics 51B and Classics 10. So I took Classics 51B first. This was freshman year. And this course was about like specifically art history. It was, I think, Greek art. No, it was Roman art history. So it was like art and architecture. So like about like Roman architectural styles. There was a creative project at the end where I ended up making a YouTube video. I think that's still up. You guys should probably be able to find that on here if you're really interested in kind of seeing what that class was like. But yeah, not bad at all. It actually made me want to take another class in the classics department just because I thought it was an easy GE and something that I wouldn't usually learn about. So that was definitely a more positive experience. However, Classics 10 was what made me not want to take a class in the classics department anymore. So Classics 10, I took that my sophomore year, and I'd say that was probably the hardest GE I ever took. So this class was like an introduction to just overall Greek history, and it was just a lot of memorization for an introductory general education course. So just to kind of give you an idea, for the midterms, we had basically the one part that I remember being the hardest was we had a section where we had to memorize a whole bunch of like Greek terms and write the definitions for those. And then there was these pictures where we had to identify what was in the picture from like a whole list of pictures that we had to memorize. We had to say like the title, and then if it was like someone who made it, like who made it, what time period it was from, and why it was like significant in history. And then on top of that, we had quotes from like our readings that we did for discussion, and we had to say which piece of literature those readings were from. So like if it was from like the Iliad or something like that, we had to identify that. So super tricky stuff, and we had to say the significance of that specific piece from that piece of literature. But yeah, it was not fun, a lot of unnecessary stress. So I probably wouldn't recommend that class unless that's something that you're really, really interested in, or if you're really good at memorizing stuff and that doesn't really stress you out. I tend to have a really hard time memorizing things, so not really an ideal class for someone like me who doesn't memorize very well. I remember sitting up for hours on Quizlet just trying to review as many things as I could. It was super stressful. Okay, so I have 3 more classes left for the GEs that I took. So the first one is going to be History 10B. So History 10B was History of Modern Africa. So this was from the year 1800 onwards, I think. I took this fall quarter of sophomore year, and I really, really enjoyed this class. It was 100% online, and it was asynchronous. So like all of the video lectures were posted early, and we could submit assignments whenever we wanted. Besides like quizzes that had to be submitted every week, I think. But I really, really enjoyed this class. The professor was super knowledgeable, and he really enjoyed what he did. You could tell he made these like kind of like National Geographic style videos with like super high quality like cameras, and like he'd zoom into things, and like he had like props and stuff. Really, really cool stuff. His lectures were actually really interesting because of that. And the class itself was known for being super easy. I mean, we have Bruin Walk, which is like our Rate My Professor. And that class is rated as like one of the easiest classes at UCLA. But along with that, a lot of people also say how interesting this class is. Like it's genuinely very interesting. And it's parts of history that you unfortunately don't really learn a lot about. So it definitely opened my mind. And yeah, I can highly recommend that. Okay, the second to last class I'm going to talk about is Musicology 68, which was a musicology class about the Beatles. And this is a class that's just kind of like one of those unique classes to UCLA. I think it's like just kind of one of the ones that people are always like, oh, that's like cool, you took a class on like the Beatles. It's just kind of one of those random classes. And I took this with a friend, and it was really easy. So it was super interesting just because our professor was like just like this like fangirl of the Beatles, and so she was just able to tell us all of these things about the Beatles, and like we basically went from the beginning of their lives to the end. So we talked about like where they were raised and how they met, and like the streets they grew up on, and like the jobs they had, and how they gained fame, and what like musical genres influenced them and stuff like that. And we had for our final paper, we had to compare 2 songs. I ended up comparing I Write Sins Not Tragedies by Panic at the Disco to Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, and just kind of comparing the 2 like genres of those songs. as my final paper. And like I said, I don't really like writing essays, so that was kind of a downside of this class, but still, it was a fun class, and we got to watch some like movies and documentaries and stuff, so I can highly recommend that as like an easier GE that's a lot less stressful and kind of fun too. Yeah, like I said, I just really enjoy taking classes like that where like it's not really anything that I would learn within nursing. Like I think it's fun to take a class that's just like completely different with like a whole different set of people that like aren't STEM majors usually and are just like interested in this thing that I like don't really know anything about. I think something like that is always really cool and a unique experience that I get to have, like going to a big school like UCLA. So the last GE that I took at UCLA so far, or I guess last GE because I'm done with them, was MCDB 60. So this was a class about bioethics. And this was one of those classes where I just had a hard time finding a class, and it was kind of one of the last options. It didn't really have that great of reviews on Brunwalk, so I was a little bit hesitant to take it. And unfortunately, I ended up with a B in this class, a B plus in this class, which was a little frustrating. I really liked the idea of this class, and I thought that it'd be a super interesting concept and like relevant to like medicine and kind of what I'm going into. But unfortunately, it wasn't the class overall was pretty boring. Like the lecture style was a little bit boring. It was online, so I think that was why, while all my other classes were in person. And the discussion sections weren't very engaging, so we weren't able to like relearn a lot of the lecture material. And then on top of that, the essays were graded very, very harshly. We had essays as our midterms and our final, and then the final also had like a multiple choice section. But yeah, basically the only grades in this class were the essays, and I think that's what ended up messing with a lot of people's grades, just because they were graded very harshly for a class where we didn't really get a lot of guidance on how to write them. So it was a bit frustrating. It was a little bit harder to figure out what they wanted, and that's how I ended up with a B plus. And I actually just found out earlier today that my B plus was an 89.9%, which kind of is just like the cherry on top that like made me not too happy with this class. So yeah, it's just classes like that I think can be avoided, and that's why I think it's really important to look on Brunwalk and really see what other people are saying about the class and trust people's reviews if they say that it's not a fun class to take, and really try to put a lot of time into that and make sure you're choosing classes that will work out better for you. So I think that wraps up my advice for this video. I want to say thank you again so much for 200 subscribers. This has just been so crazy between this and TikTok and all of that. It's like all starting to feel real, and it's so weird. Like I definitely started this as a joke, and now it's becoming a little bit more serious. But just a little sneak peek of what's coming up. In about 3 to 4 weeks, I'm going to be going to Europe, and so I'll be having a lot of travel content going up, and at the end of my trip, I'll be posting a lot of videos kind of explaining how I planned for this trip and budgeting and all of that. I think that's something that there isn't too much content about, especially from like young travelers, and so that's something I kind of want to post a little bit about. And then of course next year we'll go back into UCLA content, so you have a lot of things to look forward to. Thank you so much for subscribing, and if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing, and of course like and comment the video and all of that. I really appreciate you guys. You're the best, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.